And welcome back to another edition of the I Prefer the 80s and 90s Sports podcast where I, Richard Harris, talk about why I prefer the sports of the 80s and 90s to the sports of today. Today's topic, I'm messing with fire because today's topic, I'm going to talk a little bit about Mother Nature. I think one of the biggest reasons why I have issues with the sports world today is it's December 10th. In LA, it was 76 degrees. Yesterday it was 75 degrees. I am not complaining that the weather is good. I love it that the weather is good. I've been in LA for 27 years. Good years, bad years, great years, terrible years. But the football season in LA is weird because some years the weather is rainy, it's nasty, it's windy. Some years the weather is tropical. Some years in this city of Los Angeles, we go up until February before it rains. And then we wonder why the fire season is so bad because everything gets so dried up because there's been no precipitation. But then I look around the nation and I look at football games around the nation. And I remember as a kid in the 80s and 90s, December, November was cold. Oh man, freezing cold. And I remember playing football in the snow. I remember the many times um, where we'd be playing in the snow, we'd be playing in the cold, we'd be playing basketball in the cold, stickball in the cold. And essentially, it was cold. In fact, the cold weather is what the Giants used to use to their advantage. We loved it that the Cowboys, 49ers, whoever came from the South, came to play us, the Rams from the West. We loved it that these teams would come up to our stadium, the Meadowlands, and have to contend with the wind, have to contend with all of the things that had nothing to do with football. And I knew, at least I believe I knew, that someday the teams in the NFL were going to get smarter. Leagues in the NFL was going to get smarter. And essentially, they were going to schedule more games with teams that can handle the cold weather against the teams that can handle the cold weather versus games where teams are flying cross country. They call those games divisional games, and they eventually got Arizona out of the NFC East. They eventually got teams to play in their tropical normal spot. And essentially, the NFL, for its credit, got smarter in its scheduling, in its alignment, and essentially basically got smarter with their scheduling and made sure teams play teams in their natural habitats. Now, Miami still plays in the AFC East. and where they got to face New England, Buffalo, and the Jets, and they play in cold weather, one game a season. But maybe it won't be cold. Maybe they play those divisional games earlier in the season and they're not cold. Or the league will say, all right, Buffalo, Miami. Buffalo's already played Miami once this year, but it was in Buffalo. So now the rematch is in tropical Miami. I think Miami's played the Jets already twice, so they're done with it. No, they play the Jets one more time. Uh, I believe it's next week, and it's in Miami. So they've gotten smarter and made the cold weather teams have to go to the warm place later in the year. But as I watch these games and I say Chicago's playing Detroit in Detroit, well, Detroit plays in a dome stadium. So them playing in a dome stadium, they should play Chicago in the rematch as opposed to playing the first game. And so today, the game in Detroit, the game in Chicago, Detroit, was played in Chicago, excuse me, and there's one. I look at a team like the Houston Texans today. They played in the Meadowlands against the Jets. Houston plays a lot of its games in Dome Stadium. They lost. And so I sit back and I say, I watch all the stats. I watch all the players putting up numbers. I watch all the things that all these players are doing today. And I say, it's not fair. It's not fair. You got Dallas is playing Philly. Dallas, it looks like it's the referees don't even have sleeves. I think Dallas has a roof. It's December 10th. You're supposed to be breaking out your warm blankets. And I'm not. I still sleep with my fan on. And so the Chargers game today against Denver. It was beautiful weather. And that is one of the reasons why I prefer the sports of the 80s and the 90s. Because football is meant to be played in football weather. But because of the way the game is played today, where everybody is throwing, it is a different game. And just because something's different doesn't make it better. Doesn't make it a better game. It just makes it a different game. I'm sure. Barry Sanders, I'm sure. Jim Brown, I'm sure. O.J. Simpson would love to have run football in this era. Tony Dorsett would have loved to run the ball in this era. Jerry Rice would have loved to play football in this era. Randy Moss would have loved to play football in this era. Hell, Tom Brady would have loved to play football in this era. John Elway. I mean, how many videos have you seen of John Elway playing in the snow? Bernie Kosar in the snow. Jim Kelly, Buffalo, in the snow. Phil Simms in the snow. And that's why I get so mad when I keep hearing all these comparisons of the football players of today to the football players of yesterday. The football players of yesterday had to play through harder conditions. had to play through a different game. It is totally a different game to play when you're only playing in good weather. When you're only playing in good weather, everything's available to you. The whole playbook. You can run it, you can throw it. Simple. When the weather is not good, you got to deal with the wind, you got to deal with the rain, you got to deal with the snow, you got to deal with the hardness of the field, the hardness of the ball, the slickness of the field, the slickness of the ball. And not only that, all of the teams today, a lot of the teams today play in stadiums that have retractable roofs. So Dallas, and I'm not saying Dallas is hot weather, but it's warmer than it is in New York. They got a retractable dome stadium in Houston and Dallas. Think about it. The entire NFC South. Atlanta plays in the dome. The Saints play in the dome. Tampa Bay's got good weather, and Carolina's got decent weather. They don't need a dome. The AFC South. Houston plays in the dome. Jacksonville's got good weather. Tennessee's got decent weather. Indianapolis plays in the dome. The Raiders play in a dome in Vegas. Arizona plays in the dome in Arizona. That's crazy. But the Steelers still play outside. Cleveland, Cincinnati, Baltimore, they all still play outside. And they all build their teams to fit their weather. That's my entire point. In today's football, you could build any kind of team you want because Mother Nature wants to watch football. Mother Nature wants to watch the Giants and the Jets play. She wants to watch Cleveland and Cincinnati and Baltimore play because she only makes the weather bad for them 1 or 2 times a week or 1 or 2 times a season. Dispute it. The Patriots play in a cold weather stadium. It's like, so what? That was their, and I'm going to say it again, that is what their advantage always was. That was the Giants' advantage in the 80s because the West Coast teams had to come to us if we had home field advantage. Washington may not have been a cold weather city, but they had to come up east to play us. And we built our teams around the weather. We built our team around the ability to run the football and play defense. This NFL today, you have to be able to play every style possible because your opponents are built to play every style possible. You play the Detroit Lions throw it and run it. Chicago Bears throw it and run it. The Dallas Cowboys throw it and run it. The Eagles throw it and run it. Not like the old days where you're like, all right, you're playing the Bears this week, and Walter Payton's going to run the ball down your throat 27 times. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying I prefer the sports of the 80s and 90s where I knew every week. And I text that all the time. I say the biggest problem the Giants have, and the biggest problem the Giants have had for the last 10 years. The Philadelphia Eagles hired Chip Kelly to be their coach. And Chip Kelly was going to bring in this offense of kind of a hybrid offense where it's going to be a single quarterback, multiple receivers, one running back, and they were going to throw it all the time. Before Chip Kelly, the Washington football team brought in Steve Spurrier, and that was his plan. He was going to throw it. He was going to, you know, make games high scoring and all this other nonsense. And the Giants said, we got to compete. So what we're going to do is we're going to draft Odell Beckham Jr. We're going to draft receivers Steve Smith every year because we need to be able to keep up with the Joneses. And we got lucky. We had a good run with Eli. We had good weather. We had running attack. And we had good receivers. But then Eli got old. Then we started bringing in quarterbacks who can't throw that ball in that windy stadium. Oh, we forgot about that. We draft Saquon Barkley. We're like, great. But now we don't have an offensive line that can block. Now we don't have receivers that are game breakers. Threat. Then you look at the other teams in our division. Dallas said, all right, Philly wants to go that route. Philly won the Super Bowl a few years ago, running it that route. Let's be like Philly. Washington said, all right, let's try it too. And the Giants and the Redskins, or the Commanders now, we stink. Because we're not built that way. Dallas can play that way because they play in the Dome Stadium. Weather's good. So they can throw it all over the place. And the schedule makers do them a favor by saying, all right, you want to play the Giants' first game of the season in New York? Cool. You want to play Philly? Middle of the season? Sure. You want to play Washington? Beginning of the season? Sure. Chicago, beginning of the season? Sure. So that late in the year, they're playing all their games at home in the Dome Stadium. The old Cowboy Stadium had a hole in the roof so that God can watch his favorite football team. That's what they used to say. That God could have one eye on his favorite football team, the Dallas Cowboys. It's comfortable. But to me, it's not football. It's like 7-on-7. I mean, the 85 Bears, great defense, great everything. But 85 Bears needed that good weather, needed that cold weather to beat some of these teams, to beat the 49ers up, beat the Rams up. And I got to say, officiating in the NFL is trash. I'm sorry. I said to you before, I gave the referees a pass because I said the NFL has changed. The NFL in the 80s and 90s was a running league. So they were able to concentrate on areas on the field where it was more concentrated. Didn't have to worry about pass interference that often because they ran the football. And in December, traditionally in the NFL, teams run the ball. Not today. I mean, well, the 49ers ran it like crazy today. McCaffrey had a 77-yard run on the first play of the game. But every quarterback today, every game, is throwing the ball 20, 25 times, 30 times, 40 times, 50 times. And what's funny to me is that sometimes you're watching a game, like I was watching the Chargers game today in this beautiful weather, and Justin Herbert was getting his butt kicked by the Broncos defense. And sometimes I just wanted to scream at the television and scream at the coach and say, he's getting killed. He's gonna get knocked out of the game. You keep letting them throw it every time. I look at the Giants play prior to Daniel Jones's injury. He's getting killed. You're gonna get him hurt. What happened? Daniel Jones hurt. Herbert hurt. And you say to yourself, why don't you run the damn thing? Anyway, I prefer the sports of the 80s and 90s because Mother Nature liked football better in the 80s and 90s because she liked football weather. Mother Nature today, she must have been a flower child because she liked the nice weather. So she wants to watch those teams play football like they do in the spring, summer, and early fall. Enjoy your December, January football when your favorite teams don't make it to the Super Bowl because they can't play in the cold. You'll know why. Remember a few years ago when Lamar was killing the NFL and he was the NFL MVP unanimous? I said point blank out loud, I said they're not going to win second round in the playoffs. And some guy at the liquor store I was working at was like, "You're stupid." I said, "No, I'm not stupid. They're done." And he said, "Why?" I said, "They're done because when the cold kicks in, as a defensive coordinator, you're saying to yourself, what does Lamar do best? He runs it and he throws slant passes very well. Well, if we could take away the slant and control the run to inside the tackles, we could stop him." And the Chargers stopped him because the weather was bad. It was windy. He couldn't throw the ball deep because the ball would die in the air. Couldn't throw the ball with any loft on it because the ball would die in the air. And if he tried to run, the Chargers had a spy waiting for him to try to run. That's what December football is. December football is you walk out the tunnel and you look up and you go, you know, shut your mouth. People try to talk to you, you say, "Don't talk to me." You walk out in the tunnel and you close your eyes and you feel that breeze, you feel that wind, you feel that air. And you walk out onto the field and you look at the field and you say, they're not going to be able to do this against us. They're not going to be able to do that against us. Because as this game gets colder and colder, that ball's not going to be able to travel as far. Not today, my man. Today, Mother Nature says, all right, y'all got 3 hours before I yawn. Let it blow for a minute, and then see what happens. And during the day games, she lets the sun shine beautiful. Afternoon games, she lets it get a little chilly, lets it a little cold, but doesn't get inclement. And then the night games, some night games, yeah, the wind blows. Some night games, the wind don't blow. But maybe the night game she don't care about. She's like, I don't really like the Cowboys. I don't really like the Bears. I don't really like that team. So cold weather, kick in. I'm silly, y'all. Anyway, Flam Flam Sports Travel. If you're looking to travel to go to some of these cold games, we'd love to get you there. Check me out on my Facebook page at flamflamsports.com or Flam Flam Sports Travel. I'm Richard Harris. Have a good night.